Congratulations for getting your new BT30 spindle for your 1100 or 770. Let's take a look in this video on how to install it so we can get you back to making chips.
This video will cover the upgrade for both the 770M and the 1100M mills, but will mainly show the 1100M on screen. Anytime there's a difference, it will be noted with an on-screen graphic. Please read all the installation guides included with your upgrade and conversion packages for all the tools, requirements, warnings and cautions, and any changes to the procedure.
Before we get started with the actual install, we do need to take care of one thing, updating PathPilot. If you're at 2.4 or less, you have to click on the link above to update. Otherwise, it's always a good habit to make sure that you're on the current version.
Prepare the machine. Remove any tooling, fixtures, or workpieces from the machine. Then jog the spindle nose until it's approximately 6 inches above the table. Power off the machine and the PathPilot controller. Push in the emergency stop button on the operator box. From the PathPilot interface, select Exit. Turn the main disconnect switch to off. Disconnect any pneumatic air lines on the machine and verify that the lines are empty. Open the spindle cover and lock it in the up position. Then, disconnect the spindle motor quick connect fitting. Remove the power drawbar. Confirm that the airline with the red strip is labeled top, and the airline with the white strip is labeled bottom. If the airlines aren't labeled, label them. Disconnect the 1/4 inch airlines from the top and bottom push to connect fittings on the power drawbar cylinder. Pull out the quick release pin. Then, use a 5mm hex wrench to remove the shoulder screw from the base plate. Remove the power drawbar cylinder. Disassemble the original drawbar. While using one hand to hold the spindle lock arm, use the other to remove the spindle lock arm pivot screw with a 5mm hex wrench. Carefully remove the spindle lock arm. Remove the spindle lock base with a 5mm hex wrench. From the spindle door, remove the spindle lock arm with a 4mm hex wrench. Remove the R8 spindle. With a 13mm and a 19mm open-ended wrench, loosen the existing drawbar assembly, allowing the R8 collet, drawbar, and spring washers to be removed from the spindle. Release the tension from the spindle belt, and then remove it from the machine. Using a 3mm hex wrench, loosen all 3 set screws on the pulley retention nut. Remove the pulley retention nut from the machine with a provided spanner wrench. You will now have access to the power drawbar flange, pulley, and pulley spacer, which are keyed to the spindle shaft. Turn on the machine and the PathPilot controller. Turn the main disconnect switch to on, twist the emergency stop button on the operator box, press the reset button on the operator box, then bring the machine out of reset and reference it. Remove only 5 of the socket head cap screws that secure the spindle flange to the head casting with a 6mm hex wrench and set them aside. Then, loosen the remaining socket head cap screw, but do not remove it. Removing it could cause the spindle to fall out of the head casting. Center the machine by typing in the MDI line the appropriate command to center your machine and press enter. Place a wooden block on the machine table and slowly lower the spindle nose on top of the block, keeping it clear of the coolant nozzles. Remove the remaining socket head cap screw with a 6mm hex wrench and set it aside with the others. Slowly jog the Z-axis up just enough for the spindle to slide out, giving you enough clearance to remove the spindle pulley. Keep a good grip on the R8 spindle as you continue to jog the Z-axis up until it can be completely removed from the spindle. Install the BT30 encoder. Slowly jog the Z-axis down until the spindle motor housing is in a convenient location to remove the motor and work in it. Power off the machine and the PathPilot controller. Push in the emergency stop button on the operator box, select Exit, then turn the main disconnect switch to off. Remove the spindle motor's pivot plate clamping handle and the M10 socket head cap screw from the pivot bushing. On the 770, remove the bolt on the right-hand side. Then, using a pry bar, lift the left-hand side as you loosen the shoulder screw.
Remove the spindle motor and its pivot plate assembly from the spindle head and set them aside. Clean the inside of the spindle motor housing with a mild degreaser.
Then install the encoder reed head on the head casting using a 3mm hex wrench. Leave the encoder just loose enough to make the final adjustments later in this procedure. Route the wires up behind the spindle door switch and position the slack along the floor of the casting. To help route the wire bundle through the energy chain, tape up the loose ends of the wire. You can use a flat-bladed screwdriver to pop out each of the retainers on the energy chain. Then route the wire bundle through the energy chain and out the back. Identify smooth surfaces on which to adhere the cable tie holders. Use sandpaper to scuff the surface, which will help with adhesion. And then secure the encoder wire with a zip tie. Identify the knockout holes on the top of the electrical cabinet, remove one, and put one of the cord grips in its place. Take the encoder wire and route it through the cord grip and into the electrical cabinet. Locate the encoder wire and connect each individual wire to the supplied terminal block as detailed in this table. Inside the electrical cabinet, remove the top wire trough and set it aside. On the ECM version 1.5 board, identify the J9 connector and, if needed, cut away any wire trough tabs to make room for the connector. Connect the terminal block with the encoder wires to the J9 connector. Organize the wires into the wire trough, then reinstall the wire trough cover. Replace the spindle motor pulley spacer. First, remove the motor pulley by using a 6mm wrench to remove the M8 socket head cap screw and washer securing the motor pulley to the motor shaft. It may be helpful to use the old belt to gain grip on the spindle motor pulley. Remove the spindle motor pulley from the motor shaft with a gear puller. If you find it difficult to remove the spindle motor pulley, either get some assistance or carefully use thin pry bars. Remove the shaft key and set it aside. Remove the motor pulley spacer from the motor shaft. You can discard the original motor pulley spacer. Slide the new motor pulley spacer onto the motor shaft. Replace the shaft key that you removed earlier. Then reinstall the original pulley onto the shaft. You may need to use a rubber mallet to gently tap both of them into place. Secure the motor pulley with the socket head cap screw and the washer that you've removed earlier. Install the motor and its pivot plate back onto the machine. Install the BT30 spindle and align the encoder. Turn the main disconnect switch to on, twist out the emergency stop button, press the reset button on the operator box, bring the machine out of reset, and reference it. Find the new BT30 spindle. Disassemble the BT30 spindle from the top of the drawbar, remove the jam nut with a 19mm open-ended wrench, and remove the disc spring compression nut with a 25mm open-ended wrench. Some drawbar assemblies also include a number of shim washers beneath the disc spring compression nut. If your spindle includes these, save them and reinstall them at the same location later. Remove the 16 disc springs and set them aside. Loosen the 2 set screws on the disc spring guide with a 2mm hex wrench. Then use a flat-bladed screwdriver to separate the disc spring guide off the spindle shaft. Set it aside. Loosen the 3 set screws that secure the retention nut with a 3mm hex wrench. Remove the retention nut with the provided spanner wrench. You can use the old belt to hold the spindle in place as you loosen the retention nut. Set the retention nut aside. Remove the power drawbar flange, the pulley, and the encoder ring. Set all the parts aside. Raise the head casting to provide enough clearance to insert the new spindle. The spindle hole on the 1100M faces the rear of the machine, while the 770M has a flat which needs to face forward when installing it. Rest the spindle securely on the 2 blocks of wood. Apply a thin coat of oil to the outside of the spindle. Then, slowly jog the Z-axis down until the head casting is flush with the spindle flange. Make sure they slide in easy and does not twist as the Z-axis is lowering. Find the 6 socket head cap screws that you set aside earlier. Secure the spindle flange to the head casting with one of the socket head cap screws. Slowly jog the Z-axis up until you can remove the 2 blocks of wood from the machine table. Install the remaining 5 socket head cap screws into the spindle flange. Working in a star pattern, tighten all 6 socket head cap screws to 20 foot-pounds. Install the encoder ring with the magnetic ring pointing up. Remove any stickers from the encoder ring. Position the encoder read head tangent to the encoder ring, setting its distance with a thin piece of paper or a shim. Tighten the 2 flange screws to secure the encoder read head in place and remove the shim. Rotate the spindle by hand to confirm there's no risk of collision or entanglement with the encoder wire. Install the pulley and power drawbar flange over top of the spindle. Reinstall the retention nut. Grip the pulley with the old belt and use the provided spanner wrench to tighten the retention nut. And secure it by tightening all 3 of its set screws using a 3mm hex wrench. Install the disc spring guide, tightening the set screws with a 2mm hex wrench. Install all 8 sets of disc springs onto the disc spring guide as shown here. Make sure that all the shims are replaced. Tighten the disc spring compression nut until it's snug. To hold the disc spring guide in while tightening, insert the provided dowel into the large hole. Secure it with the jam nut and make further adjustments after completing the power drawbar upgrade. Install the new 250 poly V-belt in the high belt position and then apply tension with the belt tensioner. Manually turn the spindle to ensure that the encoder cables will not become entangled. Reconnect the motor quick connect fitting. Install the VFD. You must power off the machine before making any electrical connections. If you don't, there's a risk of electrocution or shock. Power off the machine and the PathPilot controller. Push in the e-stop button on the operator box. Click exit on PathPilot and turn the main disconnect switch to off. In the electrical cabinet, remove the lower wire trough cover and set it aside. Remove the access panel from the VFD using a flat bladed screwdriver and set it aside. Remove all of the wires connected to the VFD with a flat bladed screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, or Torx driver as necessary. Loosen the 4 mounting screws that secure the VFD with a Phillips head screwdriver, and remove the VFD from the electrical cabinet. To receive your refund or core charge payment, you must return the VFD back to Tormach. The upgrade kit will contain a flyer with more information on the VFD return process. Find the new VFD provided in this kit, and install it in the electrical cabinet with the 4 mounting screws that you set aside earlier. Install the wires that you removed from the old VFD into the new VFD. Use the following images to verify all of the connections. After double checking and confirming the wire connections, replace the access panel on the VFD. Organize the wires into the wire trough and then replace its cover that you set aside earlier. Verify the installation. Power on the machine, take it out of reset and reference it. In PathPilot's MDI line on the main tab, type admin config, then select enter. In the dialog box, select OK. The Tormach machine configuration screen will appear. Select 1100MX or 770MX depending on your machine model. Then select Save and Start. After PathPilot loads, bring the machine out of reset and reference it. In the MDI line, type admin encoder test, then select enter. Follow the on-screen instructions to verify your upgrade.
Congratulations on installing a new BT30 Spindle. If you ran into any issues, please make sure to reach out to tech support or take a look at the Tormach Tech Support YouTube channel for videos like how to adjust your BT30 power drawbar. If you like what we're doing here, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.